Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Hope you're going to have a great Memorial Day weekend. We got great sports talk for you tonight. Of course, Jeff Duncan of the New Orleans Times-Picayune is our guest. We'll talk a little bit about the New Orleans Saints. We'll get into the New Orleans Pelicans. We'll talk about the failed Super Bowl bid by the city. We'll get into some college baseball as well. All that tonight on the award-winning Inside New Orleans Sports. And again, Jeff Duncan, columnist for the New Orleans Times-Picayune, is going to give us his expertise, his take on what's happening in the sports scene here in the city. And Jeff, welcome. Always appreciate your time. And if you would, tell the folks a little bit about what's happening at NOLA.com, what you guys got coming up, and of course, how people can follow you.
Well, I'll tell you, Eric, we're getting ready to launch a series I think local fans are really going to love, especially old school Saints fans.
Yes.
Coming up here November 1 of 2016, we know is going to be the 50th anniversary of the New Orleans Saints. We're getting ready to launch a big 50th anniversary series, and we're going to go back in the history of all of our archives at the Times-Picayune and NOLA.com. There'll be some great stuff online to kind of carry you through the summer.
Yes. When
it's always kind of a dead period, non-football period. So make sure everybody looks on NOLA.com for all that, because we have an incredible archive of video and photos from the old days that I think people are really going to enjoy.
Oh, well, as a longtime Saints fan, as a guy that's followed the team since they were given to the city back in 1966, as I told many people who listen to my radio show, I can remember my mom giving us myself and my brothers little Saints uniforms, run around the Saints uniforms back in 1967 around the neighborhood. I think I took that thing off for months. I'm looking forward to something like that. That, to me, is really enlightening for the people who have not been around, but really fun for those of us that have kind of seen this team over the last 50 years.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that have come here in the last decade post-Katrina think of the Peyton Breeze Saints. They don't realize the history and the colorful history of this organization, and also some of the frustrating years that went along with it. So it'll be a fun read, I think.
Sounds great. And of course, always great column over at the NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. We appreciate your columns as well. Especially what you've been doing with the failed Super Bowl bid. Those that watch this show, though, that listen to my radio show, know how I feel. That I always felt that if the Saints and the Bensons and the city were not able to land this Super Bowl in 19, which I thought would be a long shot, I kind of felt that 22, 23, 24, 25, with the Saints' contract being up with the state in 25, and the Dome at that point, when you get to 2022, that'd be 17 years since the initial post-Katrina renovation.
Right.
About $400 million has been thrown out, even though, again, it's been modernized. When you look at this year, another $40 million in the scoreboards. How were we going to keep up with the Joneses? How were we going to keep up with some of the other stadiums that are being built, especially when you look, if you watched NFL Network, Jeff, after the presentations, all they could do was to fall over themselves and talk about the new Atlanta Stadium and the rendition of what's going to happen with the LA Stadium. And here we are in New Orleans with a iconic stadium, that's a historic stadium. We like to think of it as our Lambeau Field, but I kind of got the feeling that maybe the owners feel like at this point the Superdome's maybe gotten a little bit old. Your columns over the last couple of days have swayed me a little bit. Today, Roger Goodell wrote a letter to Tom Benson and Gail Benson and the New Orleans contingent, congratulating them on their presentation, and saying in the letter he says that that New Orleans will get another Super Bowl. So again, it's looking at least a little bit brighter that maybe 22 or 23, maybe this stadium will get another Super Bowl. Why don't you give us your thoughts, because I think you've kept a level head through all of this, and your columns have shown it.
Well, I think there's been a little bit of a misperception out there that this is a facilities stadium issue, because we talk so much about the new stadiums that are getting rewarded by the NFL. Those new stadiums are getting rewarded, basically the communities are getting rewarded for their investment, and lots of times the owners, we're talking several million, hundreds of millions of dollars of investments from the owners, And so they're going to get rewarded for that. And the NFL's made good on those promises. But I think where people locally have gotten confused is they think we need to build a new stadium. That has nothing really to do with it. You don't build a new stadium because you want to get a Super Bowl. You build a new stadium because you need a new stadium. These other markets feel like they need new stadiums. Here in New Orleans, they do not feel that way. I mean, the Superdome just hosted the Super Bowl 3 years ago. And I know we had the blackout, and it was a black eye for all of New Orleans, but it really had nothing to do with the stadium. So that's not the problem. It's a matter of a new stadium cycle. The fact that LA has gotten thrown in the mix here, that was not foreseen. We probably would have gotten a Super Bowl if that wouldn't have happened, if LA would not have gotten thrown into this mix. So we're just in a cycle here of new stadiums that are being built. And once that cycle ends, and I think it's probably going to end with if San Diego gets a stadium, and right now that's no sure thing at all.
Right.
I mean, that thing's got a long way to go. So I really think we're at the end of this cycle, and we'll get back into the mix. And what I think we'll see happening in the future is there'll be a regular rotation, and you'll see South Florida with Tampa and Miami alternating getting a game every 5-10 years. Southern California between San Diego and LA getting a game. Texas between Houston and Dallas, and New Orleans and Phoenix are also going to be in that rotation. And then there'll be a one-off every once in a while, Eric. There'll be a northern game. They'll throw a bone to Washington, D.C.,
Yes.
or maybe Pittsburgh, I know has interest, and even Denver. But those will be once every decades. So we'll be back into the regular mix. But right now, they're doing the right thing, I think, by rewarding these communities.
With that said, Jeff, you and I have talked about this on the radio show as well. When you look at the mixture of new stadiums out there, when you look at the kind of the go-to cities now, at one time, as you mentioned, South Florida, California, New Orleans, you could almost you could set your watch by it.
Right.
You know, every 5 years or so, you were getting a Super Bowl. Then you had maybe a wild card team, wild card city thrown in there. You know, that's kind of expanded a bit now, where you know, you've got some other cities that have kind of jumped in the mix, mostly because they've built new stadiums. So what do you think it'll be? Every 7 years, every 10 years, ultimately, when this again, the building of the new stadiums kind of slowly go to a crawl going forward?
I think it'll be closer to once every decade. And I just think that's because there's increased competition for these major events, for Super Bowls, for the college football's national championship, for Final Fours. It's expanded across America. These other markets are getting interested in it, and I think New Orleans, while it's still an attractive venue, an attractive destination city, just faces increased competition like everything. There's increased competition for conventions and things of that magnitude across the country, and New Orleans is always going to be in the mix. The NFL loves New Orleans. And I think it spoke volumes, Eric, that the vote for the game in 2019 was not a consensus vote.
Yes.
It went all the way to a majority vote. That's very unusual, a fourth round of votes. And we still don't know what the final tally was. The NFL keeps that pretty guarded. But the fact that New Orleans pushed Atlanta with that gleaming new stadium that far tells you what NFL owners think about New Orleans. It'll be back here, I think, in the early 2020s. And after that, I think it'll be once every decade.
Right. Let's talk about the future of the Superdome. You've been involved in the Superdome Commission, covering that for the last few weeks. What's the mindset there? You know, the biggest hurdle to doing a total renovation of the dome, keeping the shell and maybe going inside and doing that total renovation, has always been the terrace. That was again the original part of the dome. It's very difficult. I don't know if it has something to do with weight-bearing walls, or you know what's going on there as far as the freestanding dome goes. But you know, that's always been the situation. I've talked to a few people this week that believe that the way technology is going in terms of construction, that by the time we get to 2022, 2023, 2024, 25, there will be a way to go in and retrofit that dome, modernize that dome by eliminating the terrace and maybe making it more fan-friendly, more friendly for ownership in terms of selling tickets and selling those areas. That's been the biggest hurdle to the renovation of the dome in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons of the Superdome. The pros are the seating capacity, the club seats, the suite seating. I mean, it's among the highest in the NFL. So when people criticize the fact that the game's not coming here or hasn't been coming here as often, it's not because of money. The Superdome makes more money on the actual Super Bowl for the NFL than just about any other stadium. So it's not about the NFL wanting to make more money. That has nothing to do with it, because they'd make more money here, but they're still putting it, say, in Minneapolis, where the bid's not as financially lucrative for the NFL to have the game there than it would be here. But one of the pros to the actual stadium, other than the seating capacity, is that those bones are still very good. You know, the skeleton, the shell of the facility.
Brand new skin on the dome?
Can be
Brand
built
new
on.
roof, right.
So they eventually, I think the technology and the advances in construction will get to that point. What I think is interesting is to look at the new stadium in Miami. Of course, that's where the Saints won the Super Bowl last time it was played down there against Indianapolis. That was an open-air stadium in a similar tropical environment like we have here in New Orleans. But they're putting on basically just a big awning, if you will, that's going to keep 90% of the seats in the shade, but it'll still be open air. That's the technology advances we're seeing. So you can still go to the game, but you won't be in that bright sun in South Florida. I could see something like that happening to where maybe the Superdome becomes a retractable roof or something that would keep it open. And of course, that would take a lot of money, but it would be something I think that would be revolutionary.
But I do think that if you're the Superdome Commission, if you're the hierarchy within New Orleans government, even again, if you're a representative of South Louisiana, I think you've got to start looking and keeping one eye on what's going on. And there has to be a plan going forward for how we're going to retrofit this building, how we're going to maybe have to continue to modernize the New Orleans Arena, or in this case, the Smoothie King Center, to be able to make sure that both these franchises continue to be viable. Look, they're viable because of the premium seats, the suites, et cetera, what they're getting in terms of, you know, the deal with the state in terms of the revenue that they make there, but to continue to modernize this so that you are able to keep up with some of the more modern stadiums and arenas in the league.
And you're right. There has to be a long-term plan in place. And look, the officials are already talking about it. They know they're going to have to cross that bridge at some point. I think the bigger question is, do you look at renovating the dome, or do you look at a full-scale building of a new stadium? And if you do that, where do you build it? If you do decide to do something like that, there's only a limited amount of real estate in downtown New Orleans. Do you look at building off-site? I mean, there's a lot of big picture questions that have to be answered. No one really has the answers now.
Well, I would tell you this right now. I think it would be a difficult proposition, especially now when you're looking at the old Nopsey Power Plant, which was talked about to be a riverfront stadium at one time. That is now going to be a new hotel complex that's going to be part of the convention center. I mean, there's just not a lot of downtown real estate. And when you look at that sports complex centrally located, you know, the possibility of implosion and starting all over from scratch is a hard nut to swallow here. You would hope that technology would move forward so that you could keep the iconic shell and you could modernize the interior of that stadium and the arena.
Right. I mean, where do you play if you try to rebuild?
You'd have to go to LSU for a couple of years, and then again, you know, you've got the Tigers on Saturday night. You're going to play NFL football on Sunday, and if you get a bad rain on the night before, you know, we've seen other stadiums, they've tried that. You know, the NFL doesn't want that. They want a pristine carpet to be able to play on. You know, we're seeing it right now. We've seen it in other cities where they've had to do that. You would hate to do that. You know, the biggest problem would be the New Orleans Pelicans. When you go play at UNO, when you got 10,000 seats, as opposed to what you have now in a little over 17,000.
Right, and I think those are issues that neither club wants to address or face. You know, it's one thing for the Vikings to move across town in downtown Minneapolis and play the University of Minnesota. It's another thing for the Saints to go an hour and a half away. And I think that's problematic. I can't see the Saints going for that. So I think the leaning right now would be to try and retrofit the Superdome, especially at that downtown footprint. And I raised this issue today in a piece.
It was a great piece, by the way.
Well, thank you. And I raised the issue of, if you remember Arnie Filko, who I know you're friends with as well as I, when he was in charge of the Saints business operations, they looked at that tract along Poydras, Upper Poydras. It's basically an eyesore right now. It's a little bit of green space, some warehousing that could be developed into a tailgate park. I think that area is totally underutilized. And that is a bit of land. It may not fit a stadium, but could fit maybe a campus-like area for tailgating and some other activities that could enhance the game day experience.
It's never about the presentation, is it, Jeff? When you look at 2018 and you look at which was really a gut punch for all of New Orleans, we thought we'd get 2018. I don't think many people thought going into 2019 that you were really going to be able to overtake Arthur Blank and this brand new Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. But you know, everybody thought, you know, the Ice Palace up in Minnesota, that you might be able to get them to go 2019, and New Orleans would get that one. But it was not about the bid then. It wasn't about the bid this time. When you talk about the lucrative bid, the presentation, New Orleans is right there, if not in front of most cities in terms of bidding for these games.
I think Jay Cicero, the president of the Sports Foundation here, said it best. It has to be the right bid at the right year at the right time. And what he means by that is, New Orleans is a busy convention city. So there are some years where it's impossible for us to have the game to begin with. There are some years where it's going to fit better for the NFL to have the game in another market than here. So it really is a complex puzzle, and that really kind of bit us in this round of bids because we couldn't bid on 2020, we couldn't bid on 2021.
Right.
And Atlanta couldn't go to 2020 because they have the Final Four, so they had to have 2019. So really it was going to be all or nothing in 2019, and Atlanta was going to win out because they weren't going to get it for a few years.
Right. And if you look at Miami, well, again, who ends up with 2020, if it would have been New Orleans and Miami, then probably would have, because of what happened with the 2018 game, more than likely New Orleans would have gotten that game. But as you mentioned, college football championship will be in New Orleans. The NFL does not want to be in the same city as a college football championship. What is it, the 2021 game? Is that Mardi Gras?
It's Mardi Gras.
And the automotive convention.
Yeah,
so that
impossible. Hotel room
impossible.
space is impossible. Yes. And because the way it works out, if you know how the college football championship game is played, I mean, it's usually like the second week of January. It would only leave about 2 weeks or two or 3 weeks between the Super Bowl and that game. There's no way to get the build out of the championship game done and then ramp up for the Super Bowl. There's not enough time.
Well, I'll tell you what, I feel much better this evening than I did really through most of the week, in which I've been talking about on the radio show that I really think this is the last Super Bowl that we'd ever see in the Dome as it stands today. That letter today, I think, goes a long way in letting New Orleanians know that, it's not an anti-Superdome thing, it's not an anti-New Orleans thing. We still know that you're the most walkable city, that it's the best venue, you're close, it's you have all the amenities that a city needs to be able to host these games. Heck, we're the best at it. There's no one better. But it was more about other teams getting new stadiums, and at least this commissioner and even the new guard and the old guard feel that New Orleans at some point is going to be rewarded. So hopefully that's going to be in 2022.
Yeah, and I can tell you this, Eric. I was standing with Dennis Lauscher, the president of the Saints, after the vote had gone down in the hotel in Charlotte, and a number of peers from other teams came up to him and expressed their condolences, if you will, but also letting him know how much they want to come back to New Orleans. And it wasn't a canned thing. I mean, they were coming up to him on their own. I really believe that if the NFL owners and certainly not only the executives but the event planners that are around this game, they want to be here as well. Right now, it's part of NFL business to take care of these other markets.
Well, Jeff, you and I were in Miami when the Saints went to the Super Bowl. Logistically, it was a nightmare. I mean, the media center was in Fort Lauderdale, where we had to be, and then the teams practiced all over South Florida. If you were lucky enough, like I was, to be able to stay on South Beach, by the time you got back into Miami, it was a 45-minute drive. It got even worse as we got closer to game day. By Friday, it was a parking lot. You don't have that in New Orleans. In Phoenix, we hear it's an hour and a half to be able to get to their stadium. We don't know what's going to happen in Los Angeles, but heck, we know that's gridlock there. Atlanta's got their problems in terms of traffic. This is the perfect place to have a Super Bowl, a college national championship, or a Final Four because of, again, the proximity. And we were the first to do it, going downtown. Other cities have copied us. Other teams that when they build these stadiums, they want to do it downtown.
Yeah, and I tell you, the only other market I think that could rival is Indianapolis for proximity, but they don't have the hotel space. And then the other market that I would say the best Super Bowl I've been to besides New Orleans is in San Diego. When they get there, if they do get a downtown stadium, they're going to be a viable rotation partner because they have a lot of the same things that the pros that New Orleans has.
Jeff, we normally talk local sports here, but I do have to ask the question since we're talking about new stadiums down the line here. There's been some conjecture about the possibility of the Raiders moving to Las Vegas. Of course, one of the reasons why we've never seen an NFL team in Las Vegas is because of sports betting. The NFL has shied away from that. With internet betting now kind of taking over, that's kind of going out the window.
Right.
What do you think the possibility of the Raiders moving to Las Vegas are? And then what do you think the possibility is, if that happens, of New Orleans and the state of Louisiana allowing a casino or multiple casinos down the line to go to sports betting. We've never done it here in New Orleans because of the ties to the NBA and the NFL, but they seem to be softening their stance on sports betting, and that could be an incredible market for New Orleans down the line to have a southern city as a destination where people can enjoy sports betting like they do in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I think that's a very fluid situation. I think Roger Goodell pretty much tamped the brakes on this going to Las Vegas talk. He called it pure speculation right now and very premature because Mark Davis has come out and Las Vegas has become the new stalking horse.
Yes.
It's become the new LA.
It was the new LA, exactly.
Yeah, it's exactly what it's become, and they're going to use that to try and get a deal done in Oakland. But there's a lot of politics involved, especially with the Oakland Raiders and the NFL, going all the way back to Mark Davis's dad, Al Davis, who famously sued the NFL. There's no love loss in the NFL office for the Oakland Raiders organization. They're going to do very little, I think, to help the Raiders in any way because of what happened. So for them to maybe let the Raiders die on the vine a little bit out in Oakland is not beyond them. And I think that's what we're going to see happening. And they're not going to do anything, I think, to help them move Vegas. But I can tell you this, I talked to a lot of NFL executives this past week that would love a team, and love it, in particular the Oakland Raiders, to go to Las Vegas. There's going to be more money in their coffers.
Yes.
More revenue streams. It's going to be much better than Oakland right now for them. So, of course, they're all behind it, but ultimately they're going to do what the commissioner wants.
Right. Do you think there's a softening of the feeling in the NBA, who has their summer league in Las Vegas, and the NFL when it comes to sports betting? Because that's been the big hurdle for any city that has a professional franchise in terms of adding sports betting.
Right.
They have, in the past, both the NFL and the NBA has said they don't want it.
Well, Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, I think is more open to this, and he's been on record about that he thinks it's a wave of the future. It's been going on, of course, in Europe. Now, the problem, of course, is that there's been a lot of corruption involved in FIFA and in professional soccer over in Europe. But I know that Silver is much more open to it, and I think this might be one of the few cases where the NFL does not take the lead, where we might see it happen with the NBA first, and the NFL follows behind them, lets them become the trial balloon, if you will.
Let's shift gears to the Saints. Drew Brees spoke to the media yesterday at the annual Saints softball game. This one was held at Tulane. Tim Nolito was the lead guy on that. And in true Brees fashion, opened up to the media. But, you know, you and I have talked about this in the past on both the radio and TV show. And I think you've said it best. The Saints don't get moving on something unless there's a deadline.
Right.
And I think last night that Drew Brees kind of laid out there is a deadline. There's a deadline, and the deadline is the start of the regular season. If there's a deal that's not done by the start of the regular season, then you got that small window between the end of the season and the beginning of the NFL's new year till they get a deal done. Or we're looking at possibly 3 franchise tags, which is a little bit over $40 million, maybe $42 million for a one-year deal for Brees. Talk a little bit about last night's press conference, your thoughts on Brees' contract status. Are you shocked they haven't spoken in a month and a half, except for the Josh Norman situation? And do you see a deal getting done?
Well, I'm surprised the deal hasn't gotten done. And I think Drew Brees is probably surprised. And I tell you, I think it was a lot of talk at the owners' meetings this week. What's going on in New Orleans? Why is Drew Brees not signed? And someone raised a point to me that I thought was interesting, the fact that the only other comparable situations occurred in Indianapolis with Peyton Manning. He's always been allowed in the past when he was playing for the Colts to go into the final year of his deal. It's very unusual for a franchise quarterback to do that. And Bill Polian, of course, was the general manager at that time. Well, he might be the closest executive or former executive in the league to Mickey Loomis. So maybe Mickey Loomis has taken a page out of Polian's blueprint and going to allow Brees to play out the final year. Maybe he feels confident he can get him re-signed, but I think it's very dangerous. I personally think Drew Brees is going to play very well this year. I don't see any reason to believe he's not going to play well. So I don't think his leverage is going to decrease.
I agree.
But I think right now, the way the Saints look at it is it's at an all-time high. He's coming off of a great year. He's obviously driving a hard bargain. They feel like they have no other option but to try and let him play into this final year. But I do think at some point, Drew Brees and his camp, if they haven't already reached it, are going to be a little upset with how things have played out because of everything he's done for the organization.
I would agree. Now, you can't see them tagging him a third time,
No, that's
right?
not going to happen.
I mean, there's just no way he can play for that
I mean, they'll
amount
get
of
a deal done or he'll walk.
He'll walk.
Yeah, they would never. They cannot afford that. It's onerous already. I'm surprised they've allowed this contract to play out into this offseason
Yes.
at the cap number that it's at. Now, that's their own fault. I mean, they're the ones that structured that deal the way they did. It's not Drew Brees' fault that it's
Sure.
a high cap number. He's been a good soldier and renegotiated a couple times. But I do think it's created more problems. There's a reason this team doesn't have really quality guards on this team, mainly because they've had to make cuts at that position over the years, get rid of Jari Evans, Ben Grubbs. Haven't been able to draft one because of the contract situation with Drew Brees.
Right, and of course, I will take it a step further because of the bad drafts, because of the misses in free agency. Again, having at that point, when you don't have when you miss on those areas where, first of all, the draft where you can have a situation where you know exactly what these guys are making. They're not breaking the bank. They're structured. They're slotted. Undrafted free agents now who have come in and filled out the roster because you're not able to go out and able to sign the veterans you want because you don't have the money under the salary cap. I think that all kind of plays hand in hand. I'm one that, again, says when you look at Brees' contract and you look at the lay of the land in the NFL right now, he's being paid well, but again, there are other players that are being paid more handsomely that are not playing as well as Drew Brees is.
And I thought it was interesting what Sean Payton said at the OTA today, that he sees Andres Pete as a starter.
Yes.
And I think they're going to start him at right guard. I think he's going to end up starting next to Zach Strief. And that's one thing is a little bit of an indictment on Pete that he can't win the right tackle spot. But it's also interesting. It shows you they're just trying to get their 5 best linemen on the field at one time. And they also feel like Pete is better than anybody else they have there.
Right, and of course, Clemente now been moved to the left guard position. Talim Melito is now fighting for a backup job at this point. What do you think about? Now, I watched Pete last year. I didn't think he did a bad job at the guard position, but there are some out there that thought he didn't grade out well. What did you think?
Well, I thought he was like any rookie. I mean, he was up and down, and he had his good days and his bad days, his good plays and his bad plays. But that's not his natural position. I think they've asked him to get in much better shape. I mean, he was not in good shape a year ago. He needs to be in better shape to play guard in this scheme. As much as they asked him to pull, trap, get out in front on these lead blocks on these screens, he's going to have to be able to be much more athletic to get out there and make those plays. I personally think Tim Lolito played very well down the stretch. I don't think they have as big of a problem at guard as a lot of people do. I think with Max Unger at center and Drew Brees at quarterback, you've got two of the best in the business that can help those positions out.
Well, I do think that down the stretch, the offensive line played much better than they did early in the season. And I think you look at Brees' ability to step up in the pocket. You saw them getting progressively better. But we'll see. I mean, look, there's a lot of pressure to get Pete on the field. You can't have 2 redshirt years for a number 1 pick at that point. And so, I mean, there is a lot of pressure to get him on the field.
Yeah, and I tell you, but it's more common than not. I mean, we've seen it lately. I know for a long time the offensive tackle used to be the safest position.
Yes.
It hasn't played out that way. Robinson and with the Rams, Greg Robinson has not played very well. Luke Jokel, Eric Fisher, these are top 5 picks that either didn't start their rookie year or haven't started at all in the league. So it's happening more and more often. I think a lot of that can be attributed to these new spread schemes in college football are creating difficulties for scouts.
The fan base came out the woodwork on social media today when the media reported that Jairus Byrd was out again on OTAs, this time rehabbing a knee. The reports were it's the same knee that he's been having problems with since going back to 2014. Jeff, I thought it was the back, and then I thought it was the knee, and I thought he was completely healed. I surely wasn't expecting to hear that Jairus Byrd is nursing a surgically repaired knee at this point. Was that a surprise to you?
Yeah, well, definitely the injury part of it is a surprise, but I think it explains a lot of the reason why Von Bell was drafted so highly.
Agreed.
There's no doubt the Saints are moving on from Jairus Byrd, and it'll probably be after this season. Who knows? Could be this season. But there's a reason he was drafted that high. And look, they must have known this all offseason because Sean Payton, if you go all the way back to the owners' meetings in February, he was putting free safety as one of the top 3 needs of the offseason. Yes. I think it indicated that Byrd has never really recovered from that knee, and they see it as a position of need.
On the flip side, those that had a chance to eyeball practice, they said C.J. Spiller's looking fast again. Looks like he's rehabbed himself. A very down year for Spiller. Another one of those Buffalo Bill players that the Saints have gone out and coveted. He's on the clock as well. When you start looking at Lasco being drafted, you look at some of the other moves in a very crowded offensive backfield. What are your thoughts there on C.J. Spiller?
Well, they're certainly high on him. I mean, that's the guy we've heard the most praise for how he's looked this offseason, and from Mickey Loomis to Sean Payton. Now let's see if he can hold up. Let's see how he produces. There were question marks on him before he came here,
yes.
Whether he was going to be the dynamic back that everybody thought he could be. But it's certainly encouraging to hear them talk about him that way. They've also got a lot on the line with him, so
yes.
of course they're going to build it up.
Sure.
We'll see how it plays out, but I do think you have to be encouraged if you're a Saints fan.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night right here on WLAE-TV with our live broadcast at 6 p.m. You can catch us Friday night here on WLE at 10 p.m. and Pelican Sports Television in the New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette markets 9 p.m. every Friday night. Jeff Duncan of the New Orleans Times-Picayune is our guest. We'll be right back after these messages. Again, folks, stick around. You are watching Inside New Orleans Sports.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by.
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
My life is full of statistics. Thing is, I could have dropped out of school and become one myself, but I didn't because I had people that believed in me. Here's another statistic. 7,000 students drop out every school day. That's one every 26 seconds. It's time that students know that we believe in them.
Inspire a student and share your message of support at boostup.org.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. We're going to the phone lines in just a few minutes. Jeff Duncan of the New Orleans Times-Picayune is our guest. Jeff, I want to get back to the Saints in a moment, but I want to shift gears to the Pelicans for a moment, and I want to talk a little bit about what happened today. Anthony Davis did not make any of the all-defensive teams. He did not make any of the all-NBA teams. It cost him $24 million on that new Supermax deal. Look, I don't care who you are, Jeff. You lose $24 million, you can't be a happy camper at this point. You cannot be a happy camper at this point. The Pelicans have been mum on the future of Dell Demps. You're not sure what direction they're going to go at this point. They canceled his press conference. I am one that thinks that, they have a football mentality trying to run a basketball team. The leash is much shorter on general managers and coaches in the NBA than it is in the NFL. And normally when someone tries something, an experiment like Dell Demps did, where he shied away from lottery picks and tried to get players in their second contract, guys that, again, had matured as NBA players, and on paper it looked like it could work. But he picked some players that were often injured. The move to move Monty Williams out in a power struggle, obviously at this point, has kind of backfired. With that said, Anthony Davis starts that Supermax contract this year, and you got a situation where you're in the lottery and still some real unknowns about what's going on in that front office. Even national pundits are questioning whether the organization can survive with the splitting of duties of Mickey Loomis, possible handcuffs on Dell Demps. And then I had a national correspondent that covers the NBA call the lineup a bunch of dented cans, okay, because of the often injured players that they have on this team. What do you think happens with the New Orleans Pelicans? What do you think happens with Anthony Davis losing $24 million because, again, he didn't make any of these All-NBA teams?
Well, I mean, obviously the injuries he had this year derailed his season. I mean, in similar fashion to what happened with Kevin Durant, and he's bounced back and had a terrific season. It's going to happen from time to time. Let's hope he bounces back, and I think they're confident he will. But the injuries overall on this team have really clouded any type of evaluation or analysis you can make. And we talked to Alvin Gentry after the season about it. He feels like if this team is healthy, and that's a huge if,
yes.
But if they are healthy, they can be a playoff contender. The question I have, and I think a lot of fans and probably yourself have is that good enough? Is it good enough just to be in the playoffs? You have a player of Anthony Davis's caliber. Those guys win titles.
Yes.
And you've got to build a championship team around him. And right now I feel like they don't have a Robin at all to his Batman. They have a bunch of other players that I think are quality NFL, NBA players, but there's really no plan. Where's the vision that we see, and we hear Sean Payton talk about a lot with the New Orleans Saints? They have a vision for the player, as like he likes to say in Parcells fashion. I don't see the same vision or plan put together for this basketball franchise. And look, I don't think there's any, you said earlier there have been mum on the future of Dell Demps. I mean, Dell Demps is going to be here.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think at this point it's fait accompli, right?
Yeah, he's here.
He's here.
Mean, they're getting ready to have the NBA draft coming up.
It's in less than 3 weeks.
Right.
So, I mean, you can't throw a new general manager in the mix now.
Yeah.
It's his baby, right?
And I'm surprised that he has not faced the music and at least addressed the public. I think that's a little cowardly, but it's no surprise with this organization. Mm-hmm. They've always, when things have, gotten, it's gotten tough, they've gotten going. I mean, they don't come out and face the music.
They go underground.
Yeah, they stick their head in the sand. And I know I was surprised, to be honest with you, when I was up at the Kentucky Derby a couple weeks ago, to hear some of the backlash down in New Orleans from Pelicans fans that Mickey Loomis was up at the Derby, not down here minding the fort.
It's a sense of frustration, though, Jeff.
Sure,
it really is. I mean, again, nobody really would have a problem with Mickey Loomis being at the Kentucky Derby or the contingent, but I think that fans feel like now, not only are they the stepchild of the New Orleans Saints, now they're behind the horse racing stable. And, I don't know how they generate interest now, get the fan base excited once again. 15,000 people stepped up and got season tickets. You look at the corporations that again have signed contracts with this team to be corporate partners. They expect something. Nothing's worse for a corporation to buy a bunch of tickets and then to be trying to give them out to your clients or to your employees, and nobody wants them at the end of the day.
And I agree with everything you said. I think, though, Tom Benson and his ownership, that's been their MO. I mean, a lot of people felt like they held on to Jim Haslett a year too long.
Agreed.
They've been very patient before they make a coaching change. And so it's unlike a lot of these other organizations that do change out for better or worse. Sometimes I think it's good, sometimes I think it's bad. You can make the case either way. In this instance, I think it does fit with their MO and their strategy and their past history.
Well, I tell you what, I know they were really hoping for a splash to get either the first or second pick in the draft. They were hoping to roll dice on that one and come out a winner. With that said, there's a handful of players that may be there at 6. A lot of people are in love with Buddy Hield right now, and he would be a great addition to this team. Chris Dunn maybe looks like the more likely player that may be there at 6. As you look at this, who do you think may be there? Who's the best fit for this team? Hey, could this be Dell Demps once again being Dealer Dell and maybe trading out of the lottery again to get a veteran player to come here? What do you think happens?
Well, I think everything's on the table right now. This franchise is at a crossroads. They've got a lot of players in their primes, in their mid-20s. They can't afford to draft a 19-year-old prospect that's going to take time to develop unless they feel like he's a true superstar. And I don't think there's anybody other than Ben Simmons that I would consider to be in that category. Most analysts, draft evaluators believe once you get past Simmons and Brandon Ingram, there's another group of about 6 players, 5 or 6, that kind of stand out from the rest of the first round. So the Pelicans should get one of those players. I think ideally they'd love to get a scorer, a wing player that can help them perhaps replace Eric Gordon, assuming he leaves in free agency. We don't know what's going to happen with Ryan Anderson. Those are arguably the 2 best outside shooters on this team. If they lose both of them in free agency, they've got to get another wing scorer and probably have to delve into free agency to replace those players.
Right.
So ideally, I think those would be the way they would go. A guy like Hield, I wrote it when Oklahoma played LSU this year. I hope the Pelicans were paying attention.
Yeah.
Because he's the perfect type of player. You talk to people in Oklahoma, he's a leader, he's off the court kind of guy. You don't have to worry about him. And he's older. He has some tread on the tire.
Right.
He can step in, I think, right away and contribute.
Which fits the MO of Dell Demps. He wants an older player, a more mature player. He doesn't want a 19-year-old coming in and having to learn the ropes of the NBA. He wants a more mature player. So that'll be interesting to see. I don't think Eric Gordon's coming back. I don't think Ryan Anderson will be back. So again, I guess if there's going to be a splash, they're going to have to make that splash in free agency. How do they sell the New Orleans Pelicans?
Well, they sell it with money. I mean, free agency money is always going to sell, and if you can get the right deal on the table, you'll be able to get somebody to come in here and play with Anthony Davis. I think they've still got cachet in that he is a attraction. He's a marquee player, but there's no doubt they lost some momentum this past year. I mean, that was a disastrous season, timing-wise, coming off so many positive things that were going on in the organization. So, look, they may have a plan to make this thing over, not a total makeover, but a partial makeover, assuming what you and I both agree could happen in free agency with Ryan Anderson and Eric Gordon. Those are two core guys that they could be losing.
866-3200 is the phone number if you'd like to get involved in tonight's program. Jeff Duncan, the New Orleans Times-Picayune, is our guest. Well, college baseball has been excellent this year here in Louisiana. You look at Wednesday night, the Tigers going to 14 innings against Florida, the #1 ranked team in the nation, just coming off of winning a series against them. The Tulane Green Wave playing excellent baseball right now, winning the American Conference. You look at ULL, you look at Southeastern, University of New Orleans, Northwestern. I mean, you go right around the state, McNeese. Everyone seems to be playing pretty good baseball. Give me your take on the state of college baseball here in Louisiana. How many teams you think will ultimately make a regional? How many teams you think may host a regional?
Well, I think a lot of it's going to depend on how they finish up in these conference tournaments. Some of these teams are on the bubble, Louisiana Tech and Southeastern, Northwestern State, but I think clearly LSU, the way they're playing right now, they're going to get to host a region, potentially get a super regional. They're playing their best baseball of the season. They've got momentum. They've got confidence. Pulling that game out last night against Florida, I think, was huge for them, especially getting down 2-0 in the first. I thought that game was decided in the first inning. It could have been decided the other way.
Yes.
The fact that Lane got out of it, bases loaded with 1 out, and only allowed 2 runs was huge. Kept them in the game. But I think what Pierce has done at Tulane cannot be underestimated, and I think he's going to attract a lot of interest nationally. If the University of Texas comes after him, I don't think there's any way Tulane can hold them off with the resources they have. But Troy Dannon, we've seen already, has made an impact at Tulane, and he's well aware. He's friends with David Pierce. He knows that he has one of the top coaches in the country, and they're just building what's going on at Tulane. I mean, they're going to continue to be good. So I think everybody has to be excited about what's going on in this state. And I think it's, look, the way Skip Burtman raised the ante a few years ago and kind of brought baseball to the forefront, right? I think it's going on right now with the rest of the state.
It really is. Do you think, well, of course, if LSU wins the SEC, I got to believe they're a national seed at this point, the tournament, right?
No doubt.
If Tulane wins their tournament as a conference and a tournament champion, they've got to at least be looked at as a regional host site, right?
Right. I think they're kind of on the bubble.
Right.
But I think LSU, the fact that, look, the NCAA isn't dumb.
No.
They know Alex Box Stadium will be sold out. And it's been traditional for them to host those games there. I don't think there's any doubt LSU will host. And look, they're playing great right now. I mean, suddenly they're winning these close games that they were losing earlier, and that's a big thing in baseball at the end of the year.
Isn't it about maturity, though? When you look at replacing 8 position players, when you look at everything that you had to do, you had to get these guys, it was kind of maturity on the run here for them. So when you look at that, that's, you kind of see that, okay, they're kind of coming together, which is honestly is a good thing for the Tigers at this point, because a lot of people wrote them off early in the season.
And they haven't been a very good road team all year long, and suddenly they're starting to win games outside of the box.
Yes.
And I think that's critical for them confidence-wise, because once they get up, if they were to make it to Omaha, they're not going to have the box as a home field advantage.
Right. Interesting you mentioned David Pierce and maybe a possibility of Texas or another team calling, which again, Tulane knows they're going to have that anytime they have success with coaches. Rumblings are that, they may look to an alumni right 90 miles upriver in Canizaro to maybe come in and maybe take the helm of Tulane down the line.
Would make perfect sense.
It would make great sense for them if that happened.
And Troy Dannon's that kind of AD, always thinking ahead, always with a ready list. And he also, unlike some past administrators at Tulane, he wants his coaches to move on. He wants them to succeed. That's a reflection in a positive way on your program. You should want that. And I've never understood why you would not hire somebody who you think might leave. I mean, that's what you want. Eventually, you build your program up to where those coaches don't leave if you continue to be successful.
Now, I agree with you 100%. I've been saying it for years. Actually, it was Mike Vazan, was my former partner on Sports Right. We were doing Sports Before the Storm, and he said it a long time. Tulane, you want your coaches being replaced every 3 to 4 years, not because they're losing, because they're winning, because big programs are coming to gobble them up. Because that means that, again, this program is moving forward, and hopefully you get a good system. Maybe you take an assistant off that squad, whatever. But it's interesting that, once again, as Tulane kind of turns the corner here athletically, that other big schools are starting to look at some of their coaches.
Yeah, look at Gonzaga basketball as the prime example. For years, they were a stepping stone program. Their coaches went other places, and then they continued to stack good season after good season upon themselves. And all of a sudden now Mark Few's there, and he's staying there. A lot of people come in and try to hire him away, but that program is good enough now to where they can keep their best coaches. That's what you want to eventually get to.
No doubt about it. Let's head to the phone lines. 866-3200 is the phone number. Great guest for you tonight. Jeff Duncan, columnist for the New Orleans Times-Picayune and NOLA.com. Let's go to Kenner and Larry. Larry, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. How you doing, Larry?
Hey, Eric. Thanks for taking my call, man. Love your show. Jeff, how you doing, man?
Great, Larry. How you doing?
Did y'all hear the rumor that Mr. Benson's might give the $3 to Pelicans just to get him off his back because he got the Saints and the horses? And last but not least, I'd like for the Houdat Nation just to keep Will Smith and Hookie Gajon family in y'all prayers, and go Saints. Thank you, Eric. Great show.
I've always felt that for the Bensons to satisfy the promissory notes, that eventually they were going to have to sell the Pelicans. I don't think that they are going to give anything to their heirs right now because they're locked in this court battle. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I've not heard that rumor. The more likely scenario in my mind would be maybe selling a partial interest to the teams and eventually leading to whatever is going to happen down the road, maybe the post-succession plan after Gail Benson. Because let's face it, we're going to face that issue in 15, 20 years anyway.
True.
So I could see that happening. We saw that happen with the Baltimore Ravens when Art Modell was getting up in age. He sold, I think, a 35% share to Steve Bisciotti. He's able to get involved in the organization, kind of figure out the mechanics of the organization, and then takes over down the road. I think that's much more likely. But from what I understand of Tom Benson and the executives out there, they are not backing down at all.
Right.
They do not want any part of selling or settling or anything like that. So I'll be surprised if something like that would happen, especially a franchise could be as valuable as the Pelicans with the way NBA franchises are increasing.
Well, look, it increased value almost immediately after he bought it.
Right.
Which has got Gary Sweat probably kicking himself today. You know?
No doubt about
because,
it.
I mean, literally, it appreciated value immediately. Back to the phone lines we go. Greg is in Houma. Greg, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Greg.
Hey, guys, I got a question about the Saints defense. How is it that when Rob Ryan came in, the first year we kicked butt, second year we went down to last, and now we got Dennis Allen? How does that all play out with the same players as far as schemes or, making it simplified, or how do we become back into the middle of the pack? And I'll listen in later.
Thank you so much, Greg. Jeff?
Well, look, I'm shocked at how that thing has fluctuated under Rob Ryan. I'm not surprised that it was not successful under Rob Ryan because colleagues around the league, when Rob got that job, I had many people call me from Dallas saying, what's going on? Why are they hiring Rob Ryan? He's not a coordinator. And I think it played out here the way we expected. I think Sean Payton alluded to it. He's a good staff guy, great position coach, but coordinating a defense is a very big job in the NFL, and he just could not get it done. And I think the belief out on Airline Drive is that they're going to be much better on the field as far as communication, organization, just simple things of being in the right place at the right time.
Which was a big problem last year.
They could not stay out of their own way.
Right.
And Dennis Allen, I think we saw after he took over, they were much better toward the end of the year. I think just that alone is going to help this defense raise the bar a little bit, but they're still not that talented on that side of the ball.
Well, and look, they've moved some players around. Kakaha is now going to be a defensive end. He's going to rush the passer. You look at Anthony now; he's moving to the Sam linebacker. He won't have to be getting guys in place, playing that Mike, having to be the quarterback on the field. So they're at least they've seen what they've done last season, some things that maybe didn't work. I think they believe that organizationally they're going to be a little bit tighter under Dennis Allen. and now maybe they're saying that they're going to play to some of the strengths of these guys that came in as rookies that were kind of thrown to the fire. Look, I think that's the key to this defense going forward. Yeah, you want Laurinaitis to play well. You want Fairley to come in and to be able to play well. Obviously, you want Rankins to be able to come in immediately and be a plug-and-play player. But you want these guys from last year to mature and to be able to come out and play fast and not have to think. And I think that's going to be one of the keys going forward. You know, P.J. Williams, a guy that didn't see any action last year. You're hoping that he's going to come in and he's going to be able to at least be in either a nickel or dime corner. You know, so that, you know, they're banking on a lot of these guys they drafted coming in and being mature, knowing the system, and then being able to come out and play football.
Yeah, you mentioned it. The sophomore class on this team is critical. We talked about Andres Pete earlier. Davis Tolles, another draft pick that didn't get on the field. P.J. Williams, Damian Swan showed promise. All these guys have to step up in year two because a lot of them are almost like new draft picks for this team.
Agreed.
So we'll see how
but the difference is they've had a year in the system.
Right.
They know the system. It's not like they're coming in, they're having to learn a system, the terminology, and everything that a rookie does when he's swimming like that. They know that. Now, if they're healthy, they can go out and just let the athleticism take over.
And look, don't underestimate the move of getting Laurinaitis just to get them in the right play.
I agree.
That's what they brought him in to do. He's going to be the quarterback of the defense. Stephon Anthony really struggled. They asked a lot of him to do that last year, and I don't think he got a lot of help from the coaching staff. So hopefully that plays out better.
No doubt about it. Craig Robinson is going to be a nice addition to this team. I think an underrated addition when it's all said and done.
They just got to find somebody that can get after the quarterback. That's to me the most important priority.
If they can do that, everybody else is going to look better on the back end. To Wallace. Wallace is in New Orleans. Wallace, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Wallace, are you with us? Let's put Wallace on hold. Let's go to the next caller, if you would. We'll come right back to Wallace. Let's go to Walter. Walter, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Walter.
How's it going, fellas?
Okay, caller, who are you? Identify yourself, if you would, please.
This is Walter.
Hey, Walter, how you doing? Welcome to the show from Raceland.
Well, yeah, my question is, this is about Anthony Davis. Because he lost his $24 million, is that available for players in free agency? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. The $24 million was over the 5 years of the deal.
Right.
So that money now is available to sign other free agents. It's not tied up with Anthony Davis.
Yeah, you know, I don't know that for a fact.
Right.
I would assume it would be, but I really can't answer that specifically. But I do think that you know, that's money that they've got to figure out what they can do with it. If it helps them in free agency, they've got to use it because this team right now is all in to win right now.
Yeah, they have to be. There's no doubt about it. Let's see if we can go back to Wallace. Wallace, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Wallace. Okay, Wallace, going once?
How you doing now?
All right, Wallace, how you doing, my man?
Hey, I'm thinking that the Saints defense gonna be in the top 5 this year. I really do believe that.
Wow.
That's quite a rise.
Tell me something good.
Why do you feel that way, Wallace? What has they done to raise them from 31?
Change, man, we got rid of some people like y'all saying they didn't change people around and stuff, and we got this defense new coach and all that. I think he's gonna do something this year, and we got some little young dudes in here, so you know they're ready. And I just believe that this gonna be a good year for the Saints. I think we're going to the Super Bowl.
From your mouth to God's ears, Wallace, and I know every Saints fan is feeling the same way. Thanks for the phone call, no doubt about it. You know what's interesting is, you know, again, this is a year where you hope that these players are going to take the next step, even on the offensive side of the ball. You know, when you looked at Andres Pete, you want a guy like Willie Snead. Brandon Cooks, you want him to kind of turn into the guy now? I mean, he showed flashes of that last year. They signed Vincent Brown this week. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think they're kicking the tires on him to see if he's one of those veteran finds like a Tim Hightower that can come in and contribute. And I really think the offense has the potential to be a lot better, at least a lot more dynamic. It wasn't very dynamic a year ago. I think they tried to address that with Michael Thomas coming in to basically play the Marcus Colston role. Kobe Fleener, they weren't anticipating losing Ben Watson, but I think they've upgraded there as far as a dynamic playmaker down the field. So with Fleener, with Thomas, you hope is now your number 2, and then Willie Snead ideally can be your 3rd or 4th receiver because he's really, I don't think, a starting receiver in this league, ideally. And then if Spiller is the wild card, if he comes back, all of a sudden your nickel back and your nickel offense is the guy you thought you had a year ago. Suddenly you're a lot better. Then it comes down to how well's the line play.
Right.
And that's always the key to every offense. If that line holds up, I mean, this offense I think can be back to what it, maybe not where it was setting all the records, but certainly better than it's been last year.
We saw this team reward Teron Armstead with a nice contract, again, deservedly. Max Unger's the next guy up. Do you think that they make a move to sign him before he goes to free agency next year, or do they allow him to test the market? Will he re-sign a contract with this team before free agency? What do you think happens there?
That's a great question, and I think it remains to be seen on both sides. Does Max Unger see enough progress at that stage of his career? This is a guy that's got a Super Bowl ring. Right. He's going to want to win the Super Bowl. Don't underestimate how big a factor that kind of thing is. I think that's why we haven't seen Dwight Freeney here. Dwight Freeney is a perfect fit for this defense.
Yes.
He's a guy that can come in, rush the passer. He was very productive in Arizona a year ago. But at this stage of his career, he said, I'm only going somewhere where I think I can win a Super Bowl. I think that's why we haven't seen the Saints be able to get him in here and sign him. And I think with Unger, he's going to want to see how this plays out this season. The Saints traditionally have not paid a lot of money to these interior offensive linemen, except for Jari Evans.
Right.
We'll see if they're willing to break the bank for him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, when you start talking about undrafted free agency and the players they brought in, a lot of players along that offensive line that may make an impact down the line.
I tell you, a guy for Saints fans to watch is this young guy, Jack Allen, who they brought in from Michigan State. Dan Rauscher, the new offensive line coach, was at Michigan State when Allen was there.
Did not know
He
that.
had a mid-level grade, a 4th or 5th round grade. He's an undersized guy, but everything you read about him, captain, kind of a quarterback of the offensive line, very tough guy, smart, cerebral. I think this could be the Saints' center of the future. And they get him basically for free.
2014 All-American, too, if I'm not mistaken, along with Landon Turner, who also was a 2014 All-American, who now is coming in, is going to challenge at the guard position.
Right.
One of the top undrafted free agents out there who ended up in New Orleans.
Yeah, and those guys all ended up here because they saw an opportunity to come in and perhaps make this team. They see the Saints' needs in the interior offensive line. The Saints wisely went after these guys.
ESPN writer Bill Barnwell gave the Saints offseason a D- last week. He wrote the Saints are in denial about their problems. Jeff, you've seen their undrafted free agency. You've seen what they've done in free agency now. You've seen their draft. What do you think?
Well, look, I think in history, Sean Payton has been one of the most confident coaches we've ever come across. I think he's very confident right now that they've been able to address some of the major problems they've had, and that was the defensive side of the ball. As far as the organization, the coaching staff, I think he feels good about those changes. Are they talented enough? I don't think they're nearly talented enough to challenge the elite in the NFL. They're not a team that's going to make a Super Bowl run. I'm sorry, Wallace, but I just don't think they're there yet. But I do think this is a team, like a lot of teams in the NFL, that's about a 500-level team that could go either way with how breaks and injuries play out. They could be in the mix to get in the wild card hunt maybe, and get in the playoffs. I don't think there's any doubt they could do that. They also could end up 4-12 or 5-11 if things don't go their way. A lot of teams are in that same boat. The Saints find themselves, I think, fighting for a playoff spot, but I can't see them challenging the elite like the Green Bays or the Arizonas, who I think Arizona's going to be very formidable. And don't discount Dallas now that Tony Romo's back.
Does it look like it's a 3-year plan now to try to get back to prominence? Is this a 2-year plan in your mind?
I don't know. I mean, I think we've got 2 different timelines.
Right.
The Drew Brees timeline and the rest of the roster timeline. And I think that's why we've heard all these rumors about the Saints wanting to look at a quarterback, because I think they'd ideally like to move on. The guy that I wouldn't be surprised, and don't discount this down the road, is Jimmy Garoppolo. He's a guy that Sean Payton, he's the backup in New England.
Yes.
Sean Payton was very high on him coming out of Eastern Illinois. He's sitting there behind Tom Brady. He's not going to play Brady. The Patriots are going to have to do something with him soon. And this is a guy that has been in the NFL system for 3 years.
Yes.
So that could be the Saints quarterback of the future.
Jeff Duncan of the New Orleans Times, speaking of NOLA.com. Thanks so much for being with us tonight on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric.
Always appreciate it. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 p.m. Also on Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette markets, 9 p.m. every Friday night. You can catch me on the radio, 990 a.m. WGSO, 11 to 1 weekdays. Also, the TuneIn Radio app is a great way to take the show with you anywhere. It's a free download for your smartphone or tablet, and you can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. You can also catch every episode of the award-winning Inside New Orleans Sports at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks to our guest, Jeff Duncan. Also to the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Kenny Juno, William Hill is my director, also Philip Williamson and Naila Jones. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. We'll see you right back here next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.